Dr. Richard. This is Mirwais Fahez, a national of Afghanistan, currently working with UNICEF, United Children's Fund, in Afghanistan for almost 18 years. So I've been working with UNICEF in the capacity of education officer for learning assessment project. It's a huge project, and also working on curriculum reform project. Prior to UNICEF, I have been also an experience working with other UN agencies and also NGOs, international NGOs like IRC, UNOPS, Handicap International in different capacities. But my passion and also in terms of profession, I'm an education specialist. I've got my master's degree in educational science from Karlstad University in Sweden. So that's it.
So how
I start. It's a long question. I mean, I started back. Actually, I learned French when I was at school. It was a second language for me when I was studying in Kabul. So back in 1990, I went to India because I migrated there due to the security situation in Afghanistan, and then I started learning English there. So gradually, I had my courses and also interaction with friends who were able to speak English, and then gradually I tried to. But I'm not very good in English. At least I can communicate.
No.
but yeah, that's where I started, and now at least I can communicate. Thanks. I born in Kabul in 1974. In a bright-minded family where I had my father who is passed away, and my mom and 8 sisters. I started my primary education up to higher education in Istiqlal High School in Kabul. Then, due to the security issues and conflicts, war and internal conflicts in Afghanistan, I was not able to pursue my higher education. Then, back in 2006, I started my bachelor degree with Kabul University. My field of study was philosophy and sociology. So I got my first degree, bachelor degree from Kabul University. So it was a big challenge for me because I had to work and also support my family and also study in the same time. So I got my first degree in 2011 from Kabul University. Then in 2013, 2012, I got a scholarship through SIDA, Sweden, international donor. I pursue my master degree in Sweden with Karlstad University. Again, I had to face the same challenge because I had to work and also to study. Successfully, I completed my master degree in Sweden back in 2014. Yeah, it's quite difficult in Afghanistan to maintain the balance between work, life, and also studies. But I try to maintain all these balances and successfully completed. Currently, also looking for some PhD courses. I mean studies. Mm-hmm. I have contacted a few universities, so let's see which one will give me an opportunity to, because I'm passionate about go further and have more studies and to serve my people who really need and also the children in my country. Because my motto is I spent 4 decades of my life in war and conflict, but I am committed to my children in next generation who should not serve, live in conflict and internal war. So that's my motto as well. Well, yeah, it was myself, not my parents, because when I studied my got first degree in sociology and philosophy, there are so many philosophical debates and discussions over the education, because education can be a platform where you go ahead with the development issues. And that's the root causes, to my understanding, the insecurity and also instability in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, the literacy rate is very low in Afghanistan, and that's a platform where we can build. And I found interesting topics in education while I was studying getting my first degree, and I mean also on my job, which was previously I was working as a program assistant, so I felt that I can contribute through this platform to work and serve my country. So it's only me who decided to go ahead with education, and I really think and I trust that if we build this educational system and also train the teachers and also have a good curriculum, and then simultaneously we'll have a learning assessment system. And I mean, of course, when we build up the education system, of course, we would have a peaceful life. When people are bright-minded and they learn something, of course, they will not be involved in conflicts, and they will understand, and they will also utilize their energy and potential to serve the country rather than involving in the conflicts, and better using peace, live in peace and stability. I studied a lot of books, and also, to be honest, that spark was one of the African proverb which says, if you prepare for today, you can have a development or a bright future. If you prepare and plan for today. Maybe I can find the exact because I steal that proverb, African proverb, is my mind, but I just want to get the exact what was said in African language, which I translated. Just if you give me one moment, it's my. Okay. Yeah, it says, "For tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today." It's an African proverb. So that was really a spark which motivated me to go with education, and I trust and believe that it can be a platform for rebuilding this country and have more children who could also be the next generation who will support and continue the same peaceful situation and living condition in Afghanistan. That was the only spark, I could say, which motivated me. Yeah. We met in 2002, where Dr. Richard was my chief of section, and I was working in Herat in Western region as a program assistant. So we had discussions, because on that time we had a huge campaign of back to school, where we had expected to have more students enrolled in the schools. On that time, I remember it was around 1 million students registered, only boys. Girls were banned during Taliban time to school. So we met there in Herat. We had a discussions on how to provide temporary learning spaces. And on that time, as an emergency response, there was a discussions to provide school tents as a temporary learning spaces. But my argument was, because we spend a lot of money on procuring the tents, why not to use the available local materials and build those schools which can long last, and also it's durable. So we met in Herat, and then Later on, I was asked to come to Kabul, and back in 2003, where Dr. Richard was my direct supervisor, and I learned a lot from him the way, and he's the one who still I remember, and his profession and also professional style and also the management style I like. And still I remember with colleagues and discussed that the only person who I remember, because he was really a professional and also a good manager, is Dr. Richard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think since you left Afghanistan back in 2005, there are changes in the education sector in Afghanistan. I could say mainly the number of students, which was like 1 million back in 2002, it's now reached to almost 10 million enrollment rate. We had like around 18,000 teachers. Now we're talking about 220,000 teachers.
Amazing.
We didn't have an official curriculum. I mean, we just started. Now we do have an official curriculum, which is now subject to a reform, and there is a reform process of the curriculum is ongoing. There was 70% of the schools didn't have a school building, but now it's nearly 50% doesn't have, which means 30% of schools are either rebuilt or rehabilitated or constructed newly. Mm-hmm. In terms of literacy rate, I think while you were there, the literacy rate was around 18%, if I remember correctly, but now it's at 34 to 35%. I could also maybe discuss on teachers training. At least we have 40% of the teachers who didn't have basic competencies and also educational background with teacher education. Mm-hmm. Now I could say around 40% of teachers at least completed 14 grades of teacher education.
Wow, that's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, I think it's a huge progress towards education sector in Afghanistan, but still there are gaps. Still we need to work more. And in terms of how this education sector impacted, I could say now with the turnover of so many governments, at least people are passionate about sending their children to school, but the issue of quality education is still remain a gap. Sure. We need to work more on improving the quality, which includes the learner itself, supporting by parents, the curriculum itself, teacher education, and also learning assessment, which we recently, for the first time in the history of Afghanistan, at least education sector, now we do have an education, learning assessment framework in Afghanistan. In terms of other aspects of quality, we really need to work on the supportive system to provide more quality education to students, which involves principals, administrators, and qualified academic supervisors to go and provide support to the education sector.
Right.
In terms of course, the impact of education, people are trying, even they can suffer from hunger, but you might have received the reports which was conducted a few months back. 54% of Afghan population are under poverty and hunger, mm-hmm. which is a bad sign. But still, people are willing to send their kids and children, and they really want, because majority of our people seems to be tired from the war and internal conflict, internally displacements, and they really want to, and they also believe that education will bring a change in their lives. They can grow up in peace and also stability, and also education could be used as a economical income generation, where they can get better jobs and also serve the country. So I see there is a big passion among passion among the people, and even they contribute to education sector in terms of provision of land for school construction, provision of some basic teaching learning materials to the schools. They can also they contributed in some sort of provision of monitoring to ensure that even supplies are reaching the end users, protecting the schools from the attacks, which we unfortunately have several attacks on the school by anti-government elements. So I see people are more alert, and they really want to contribute to the education sector, because what they believe is education can be is a platform where to build a country.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think. I should not forget. I think your contribution, I still remember back in 2002, 2004. So you put the foundation of what I remember, the teacher education, and you developed with the support of other colleagues the INSET 1 and INSET 2, which I remember. Yeah. Now, good news is now that promoted to INSET 6 with more ideas and concepts. Yeah. So I think there is a political will on education sector in Afghanistan. The president of Afghanistan is personally committed to in provision of good quality education and access to education. Recently in 2017, I could say the third national education sector plan, which we call it NESP 3, was developed with 3 thematic areas of now the first thematic area is the focus is on quality and relevance, which is the improvement of the revision of curriculum as a first priority, teacher education, early childhood development, learning assessment system to be built. The second is provision of access to education, which involves establishing of the 2 different strategies of accelerated learning centers, community-based education, and to most deprived children, and also those who do not have access to education. And the third is management of the education sector. So there is, I could see, there is still a political will over the education. Recently, government of Afghanistan committed to build around 6,000 schools in next 2 years using the funds they receive, and also to improve the quality and relevance of the education. The discussions and debates over how to improve the quality is now they're trying to incorporate the applied education, which means you better know that to reduce the rote learning and have more applied ways of how when the students learn something, be able to apply it in their lives. Right. And to incorporate also the 21st century life skills and competencies into the curriculum, to have more responsible citizens in future. There is a political will, I could say, in general in education, but there are still gaps because unfortunately in past 2 years we have a turnover of the minister with who were with different visions. The prior minister had, I could say, limited visions, but the current one, who's a young guy, I could say, is the same name with me, Mirwais Fahez. He's also he has a very good vision for education sector in Afghanistan. There is and also dedicated deputy minister who is also following on improving the quality education, because we, as I stated before, now in terms of enrollment, we are in a better position. Yes. But there is a more focus on improving the quality, because what we meant by education is not only the provision of access, but the student should learn something when he or she is at school. That's right. And in the same time, also maybe I can mention recently UNICEF with conducted a survey and research in which on out-of-school children. Unfortunately, it is stated that 3.7 million students are out of school, which they haven't been to schools or they are not enrolled in school, and majority, around 60%, are girls. So, which there are different factors for these students. I could say securities, it comes as a first because due to the security issues, they are not accessing their schools. The second majority
of this
around I think 41 or 41% of the current. Let me ask my colleague because he's super good in data. Parvez, how many the proportion for girls enrollment is 41% in Afghanistan out of 10 million. The proportion for girls enrollment in general education. I think it's around 41. I read in the latest EMIS report. Okay, he will get back to us. 40%, which means still we really need to work because girls' education is an obstacle in Afghanistan due to various factors: security, female teachers, wash facilities.
Yeah, exactly.
So
but it's
I got the information. It's 39%.
Okay.
Yeah, I think disparities is not this. Stops and it's quite visible at the secondary level because at the primary we have a great enrollment of girls, but then up to I could say grade 6 students, which would become also somehow we call it adolescent level, then they stops because culturally some people stop sending their girls because they believe that's no needed after certain ages. And also in the same times early marriage is another obstacle, which is a cultural belief in Afghanistan. So there is a culture, gender disparity starts after certain grades, like grade 6, which is, we call it secondary education, beginning of the secondary education. So we do have a dropout on a grade dropout. So at certain grades. So it's not equal, following the steps for girls. So in certain stages, they have been stopped, or the early marriage is another obstacle, which prevents girls to continue their education. But having said that, there are efforts undergoing to mitigate and also provide more facilities to eliminate this obstacle, like those girls who were out of school or did not complete. We also have another strategy of accelerated learning centers, which provides 2 years of education in 1 year to and enable the girls to. Another obstacle is also was the lack of female teachers. The people and families who are not willing their girls to be taught by male teachers.
Right.
So these are the factors, and as an education sector, the development partners are working together to address these issues and provide support to those girls who are out of school or they want to continue their education. Overall, I could say it's that there is a dropout rate, a higher dropout rate at a certain grades, especially with with secondary education. So it's not the same as they start at grade 1.
Right.
Left Afghanistan, I think I could see little progress is made on Tibet because of different factors. We do not have the exact capacity to scale up this pivot to other provinces in Afghanistan and also to schools level and have more professionals, at least I could see a professional generation to the work market. But what the strategy is now is more focus on applied education for the general education, which means apart from pivot, they are trying to incorporate applied education, which supports the students to be able to apply those knowledge they have acquired at school to be able to apply it in their real lives, which means there will be more on practical education. For example, I could say when I was also a student, we tried to memorize things in order to pass through the university entrance examination. But now the government also realized that to reduce the memorization because knowledge is separated everywhere, so we could learn everything. I mean everywhere, but why not to turn to more an applied education system? Be able that students has the 21st century life skills and also competencies like critical thinking, decision making, other factors which is really required. And also recently TVET became an independent organization, so separated from the Ministry of Education, which means there is no more linkage with the ministry because they will act as a more independent organization. And there was also a newly appointed chief for TVET. So I hope this strategy will give more freedom for TVET to explore and scale up the interventions to other parts of Afghanistan, and also train and also more professionals to meet the job market needs and also contribute to the development of this country strategy. But also it depends on the funding, because all these are linked to the funding. If we have more funding and also could support economically this, because that requires a huge amount of money to run these schools. But in terms of managing this, I think it's a good strategy to be separated from the Ministry of Education. But of course, there should be linkages with higher education. Unfortunately, in Afghanistan, different sectors of education run by different ministries, I could say. And it's not a more coherent and also linked education system, because I'm sure you still remember the kindergartens or the early education, which is the vital part of the education system in a country, is run now by Ministry of Social Affairs in Afghanistan.
Yeah, you're right.
And there is a debate and discussions on when UNICEF is supporting also to develop the standards for education, to bring back this sector and this portion to Ministry of Education and control it. And also higher education is run by Ministry of Higher Education, while other teacher education is administrated by Ministry of Education. So there is not a clear cut strategies for bringing all these components of education sector under one ministry, and because I'm sure there are challenges. I could just give an example of early childhood development or preschool education. Ministry of Social Affairs, who is primarily responsible for the kindergartens as a preschool education provision, has developed their own curriculum, and also Ministry of Education has another curriculum framework. So even the textbooks are quite different things, but Ministry of Education has not started the development of textbooks. So these are the factors which contributes to, I could say, low provision of quality education in this country. But overall, I think it's a good, to my understanding, good strategy, as long as they get more funding to scale up, because what they have is very limited, cannot meet the demand. On the demand side, the supplies is not sufficient to meet the demand. So I hope the government could contribute a little bit economically to this DEVET sector, and they could have scale up all these technical vocational schools all over the country, because we have only a limited number of DEVET schools in country functioning, but we need to scale up. But the good point is, as I mentioned, they are trying also to incorporate the applied education in the general education curriculum, which is a very positive point. And to be honest, I was fighting for that we need to focus more on applied education rather than encouraging the students to be root learners. Mm-hmm. So I think the good point is that the ministry is now focusing more on applied education to be incorporated into not the new curriculum, but the existing curriculum is going to be reformed, incorporating all those life skills, competencies. Maybe just an update, the new curriculum framework is almost finalized. It's under review by the Ministry of Education to be endorsed. Currently, the syllabus development is also completed. The next step will be the actual textbooks development in country. There is some changes in the curriculum. I could say the number of there is also other, apart from integrating the applied education and 21st century life skills and also competencies. Also, there are some integration of various subjects, like integration of I could remember geography and history into one. Mm-hmm. Also, others maximizing the resources they have, and also the capacity building of the teachers, which is a vital issue in the sector. So there is a plan for that simultaneously also integrating of comprehensive learning assessment system parallel to the curriculum reform. Once the curriculum reform is completed, then there is work ongoing to establish this system, learning assessment system, including the development of standardized test items and also other components of learning assessment, like classroom assessment, standardized examination. Also bring up the international assessment, and students be able to be assessed at an international level. And also they're trying to have a very regular larger scale assessment included in the system to diagnose the system, to see what are the factors or the gaps in the education sector in Afghanistan.
Wow.
So all these efforts ongoing to contribute for a better quality education in English. Actually, UNICEF is still working with supporting Ministry of Education technically, financially to build the education sector. Apart from that, last year education was appointed as a sector lead for among the development partners to lead this sector, and also government of Afghanistan trying to work closely with the UN, and also as part of that one UN strategy. There are 6 thematic areas where UNICEF role is for this thematic, along with UNESCO, to lead this sector, and also work together to contribute to the better quality education access to students in this country.
Well,
and of course, UNICEF is trying also to support Ministry of Education to build the system, both financially and technically, and have a sustainable systems in place, capacity building, and also technical financial support is still. I think at this stage we really need experienced people like you, Dr. Richard. Honestly, it's a very critical process undergoing. I was discussing, and hopefully I will meet the minister personally, not at UNICEF level, because that's not my level. But I'm trying to discuss with him. We really need to have people like you to back at this stage, because you started a project, somehow it's completed, but some activities we were discussing back in 2003, still you need to work. I could see still, as I discussed earlier, there are gaps in education sector. Teacher education is a total gap, I could say. Unfortunately, still we need to work more on the teacher education and bring up some more innovative approaches for teacher education. And there I see and I feel your contribution is vital and to this sector. And I hope to work and see you again in Kabul. I think, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just, something came into my mind. I was discussing with a couple of parents when I was in Kabul. And there is a huge desire for education sector. And I said, yeah, it's conflict and war. We have anti-government elements, things like that. Can you imagine? One of the parents told me that, well, anti-government, or I'd say Taliban is there. If they kill or through a suicide attack, they will kill a few students or children, but we can have more children. But try to work on education, because that system, if you do not take care, that will kill a huge generation.
That's right. That's right.
And he was right, and I was really, I got emotional on that, and I said, yeah, you're absolutely right, because let's look on a large scale how education system really impacts the life of people in Afghanistan. And through that statement, I was really encouraged and trying to work, and I'm still standing on my commitment that I spent 4 decades of my life in war and conflicts, and I will not let my next generation, at least my own children, to suffer from the conflict, and also have a peaceful life and live in stability and also in peaceful environment.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Yeah. If God willing. Yeah.
Thank you for this conversation with you, and please remember, you always have a close friend. And
exactly. I pass my regards to your students. I wish them all the best, and I hope we have more interaction. Unfortunately, due to time differences, we are not able to have a real interaction and have more questions and answer sessions. But I look forward to meet them again in future classes. So I wish them all the best. Keep education and also serve the people everywhere in the world.
Well,
I could say 1.5 decades. I wish you all the best, Dr. Richard, and let's keep in touch. And I'm in service to have more interaction with you and your classmates.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.